With just over a week to go until the NHL Trade Deadline, there's been so much talk about which different NHL teams will make those big moves. So which NHL teams will be the biggest buyers and sellers? We'll watch till the end for the complete list, and let's get straight into it. Now let's get today's list started with the first buyer of the NHL Trade Deadline, and this is already a team that has made waves throughout the last couple of weeks, and that is the St. Louis Blues. A team that, especially in their position of the standings, you wouldn't expect to be here. Even though in the entire NHL, they're 25th out of 32, I think the St. Louis Blues can make some massive moves. After the Blues made the Ryan O'Reilly trade, we already started to hear a lot of trade rumors about their future, what they were planning on doing if they would want to go in a full rebuild, a full retool, and we got a pretty good understanding of what they could potentially do. And recently as well, they have been linked to both Timo Meier and Jakob Chychrun. And to me, especially the Jakob Chychrun situation, I could see the St. Louis Blues being the team to trade for him in the end. Of course, we've already seen the Vladimir Tarasenko and the Ryan O'Reilly trades, so right now the St. Louis Blues have 3 first-round picks, and right now are in a pretty great position if they want to trade for a big star. And on top of that, for a team like Arizona, the prospect pool also has some pretty good highlights in players like Jake Neighbors, as well as Joel Hofer, and other players like Zach Bolduc. Even though I think Jimmy Snuggerud is a player that might not go because I think he's a little bit untouchable in St. Louis's end, I still think there's a ton of options if the Blues want to go after a big player here. And honestly, considering St. Louis' situation, they might be one of the few teams out there that will be willing to give up 2 first-round picks in a potential Chychrun trade, and I think for Arizona, especially wanting as many draft picks as possible, that goes a long way. Now let's talk about the second big buyer here, a team that I think will be a fixture in the last week of the NHL Trade Deadline in on so many different players, and that's the Boston Bruins. Now Boston's in a really unique position. They're far and away so far the best team in the NHL this year, but they're a team that can also still stand to add, and especially considering their roster and the current situation in the future, this might be a situation where Boston truly goes for it, goes completely for broke, especially with the fact that Pastrnak will be a UFA after this year. Now, we've already heard a ton of rumors about the Bruins maybe potentially giving up a first and third for Vladislav Gavrikov on that left side, and that could potentially happen as well, but there's also a lot of other options that could happen, mainly as well as some cap dumps, maybe featuring Craig Smith, maybe getting rid of a player like Brandon Carlo perhaps, or a Matt Grzelcyk. There's a lot of options for the Bruins right now, and Gavrikov will definitely likely be among them, but I think they could also stand to even add a forward if they wanted to. Just imagine getting like an Ivan Barbashev on top of a Vladislav Gavrikov, and this Bruins roster is actually stacked, and going back to the Blues situation would give them more picks to potentially flip in a Chychrun or Meier trade. But now let's move on to the third team here and the third buyer, and in my opinion, the team that will buy the most at this year's NHL Trade Deadline, especially with Mark Stone going on LTIR, and that is the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, not even talking about the Vegas Golden Knights' reputation for making big friggin' trades, they are in a unique position right now where I think they can stand to get a lot better, and they also have the cap space to do it. With Mark Stone going in LTIR, the Vegas Golden Knights right now have $8.7 million in deadline cap space, and we know the Vegas Golden Knights, they're going to use that cap space. And just like the Boston Bruins, this could be a kind of go for broke year for the Vegas Golden Knights to truly once again push in the playoffs, especially with how wide open the Western Conference is and the cap space the Golden Knights have. I think this is a unique opportunity to seize that chance. Obviously, we've seen them in the mix for Timo Meier. I think they could be one of the few teams out there actually in the mix for Patrick Kane, and realistically in the mix for Patrick Kane, which would be insane to see. There's also players like Jake McCabe, James Van Riemsdyk, that I think they'll be heavily into if they don't get a top dog like Meier or Kane. But now let's move on to the sellers here and get on to the first team. This is a team that nobody is surprised to see here in the Arizona Coyotes. But you might be surprised how many different players could be in play, because we've obviously heard ad nausea all the Jakob Chychrun stuff, but they have a ton of players outside that could be dealt. Of course, outside Jakob Chychrun, you got Shane Gostisbehere, who even though he's been banged up, has been fantastic this season in an offensive role for AZ. And on top of that, you got Nick Bjugstad, and maybe even an outside chance of seeing Lawson Krause traded, a guy that we've seen a ton of rumors about as a big scoring power forward. And we even saw rumors that the Arizona Coyotes were potentially going to trade Karel Vejmelka to the LA Kings. We could maybe see them trade their #1 starter, which would be wild to see. Next, I'm going on the second buyer, and we're going to go on to another Western Conference team here. Next up, I have the San Jose Sharks, who are also in a pretty unique position here because they got 2 guys that have generated a ton of interest in Erik Karlsson as well as Timo Meier, but they also got a ton of depth that I could absolutely see being moved. They got a few interesting guys with Kevin LeBanc having 1 year left on his deal offer this. Same thing with Alexander Barabanov. On top of that, you got Nick Bonino as well as a potential rental, and I think he's definitely the most likely guy to be dealt at the deadline for San Jose. And that's not even talking about James Reimer, who is also rental, and for a team looking for some more stability, potentially as a backup, he could be a nice addition as well. But next up, let's move on to the third seller, and to me, the biggest seller at this year's NHL trade deadline. And this isn't including Jonathan Toews, who will likely not be dealt at this year's deadline, but I have the Chicago Blackhawks, who even though with Patrick Kane and all the rumors we've seen about him and even some of the coldness that's been spelled on that whole situation, I still think even if Patrick Kane isn't dealt, there's a ton of guys on Chicago that they're going to offload. You, of course, got big ones like Jake McCabe, potentially. You got other guys that could be dealt like Connor Murphy. On top of the forward group, you got Andres Athanasiou, potentially a player like Max Domi, of course, Sam Lafferty, and of course, the big one in Patrick Kane, who, if he is dealt, will still get a lot of assets back, especially with how well he's played recently, which I think could maybe spark some more trade discussions, potentially to more teams out there like maybe the Winnipeg Jets. But the Blackhawks' future is insane right now, and especially with their draft picks, they have 11 picks inside the top 3 rounds in this year and next year's drafts, which is absolutely insane. But I'm just saying, expect that number to go up. But those are my buyers and sellers for the 2023 NHL trade deadline. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys agree and disagree with. And let me know as well, what do you guys see your favorite team being, a buyer or seller? What will they do at the deadline this year? Let us know down below. And of course, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Share the video with all the hockey fans you guys know online. Get all the buyers and sellers out there. And I will see you guys in the next video. Have a great one and goodbye.